My name is Allyson Barnard. Ooh, I can. What's here? I am going on my 12th year of teaching special ed. I have done a wide variety of programs, resource room, K-8, 5th and 6th grade resource room, and now I do a K-4 social emotional program that's self-contained. I've worked really hard at integrating my kids. Talk about that a little bit. But my program, so my social emotional program focuses on not just kids with autism, but a wide variety of children. Some of them have autism spectrum disorders. Some of them have the exceptionality of emotional disturbance, which are kids who often have behavioral disorders, anxiety, with other things as well, or other health impairment. There's so many diagnoses that kind of go like this, and it's hard to rule them out. But depending on the severity of need, kind of depends on the exceptionality they get, depending on which one comes first. My program is pretty much one of the last programs before kids get decided whether they stay in a public school or whether a special purpose school is needed. I started my year with 10 kids on my caseload, and I ended with 26.
Oh.
Yeah. So the state says that I can't have more than 35 kids on my caseload for special ed. However, I can only have up to 11 at one time in a self-contained setting, given the level of need of the kids that I have. So that's kind of my history. So I got into special ed in high school. I had all my college credits, and I started doing respite care for families with kids with autism. And that was kind of the icing on the cake for me, to see how hard these families had to work at home gave me a completely different perspective that I hold very close to me as a teacher. When it's very easy as a teacher, and I'd be guilty to say that I don't do this now, to pass judgment on families for why their kids act the way that they do. I think our population of kids on the spectrum, and I'm going to tie in a lot of kids with an emotional disturbance too, because I feel like this is an area that's becoming more and more identified in kids. I've never seen anything like it in my 12 years of teaching. A lot of my focus now, as I try to grow professionally, is around mental health in kids, because of just the demographics right now in our society. But having that experience and working with families outside of school really made me a better teacher. And I think that because it is not easy when you take away the structure and routine and consistency of a classroom that these kids need. It's a nightmare for a parent. And, I don't know how many of you are parents out there, but I try as a mom to create as much structure and consistency for my kids, and it's absolutely exhausting. And then you throw a child with disabilities on top of that, kids who are set off by change and they're not flexible and noise. It's really a nightmare. One of the things I do as a special ed teacher is I try to host some family nights. So some of the curriculums that I use in my classroom, parents can try to make that connection and use that same language at home, because I have a very successful program. I cannot take all of the credit because I have a phenomenal staff that work with me. I have 6 or 7 ed techs that I supervise who help implement individualized programs into the regular ed setting, but also who work in my classroom solely with me for kids that are self-contained and can't leave. And I'll talk about some of those programs with you. So what my day kind of looks like from a special ed perspective, the kids come in, and I have a lot of kids who have autism who are able to check in with me first thing in the morning, and we kind of set the tone. One of the pictures that I sent earlier was for expected and unexpected behaviors. We use that language very consistently, which is it's a part of the social thinking curriculum that we do, but the biggest part for this population of kids is the black and white of what we do. And when you teach expected, as in that's following the rules, and unexpected is breaking the rules, then you can start to teach different routines and rules for different classrooms, different hallway, cafeteria. And it starts to get kids to monitor their own behavior, because you can ask them questions like, is that expected or an unexpected behavior? And they start to classify the way that they act on that language. And what we do in my social skills group, so I teach 3 or 4 social groups a day, we come up with expected and unexpected behavior for all the different areas of the school. So we come up with the cafeteria, the hallway, the playground. What's expected in my classroom may not be expected in another classroom. So sometimes with kids with autism who struggle to generalize skills that they're learning, they need specific teacher's name. So sometimes it's too general to say, like we have our a K1 playground, and then we have a 2nd and 3rd grade playground. So for some of my kids on the spectrum, they may know the rules on that kindergarten, 1st grade playground, but you bring them to a whole new playground and they don't know that those same rules apply. And so I have to overteach those rules in hopes that they generalize them to different settings all the time. And what they do for me, they don't necessarily do for other people, which is how you know whether you're teaching it really well or not really well, is whether they can do it outside the environment where they've learned it. And oftentimes my kids do really, really well for me. And the connection there is being able to get general ed teachers who are really willing to work with you with these kids. It takes a lot of patience. I would say that I have a lot more hard days than good days. There's something called an extinction burst, and it's when you set limits for kids and you teach a new behavior plan or a new expectation, and you don't back down. The behavior and everything often gets worse before it gets better, and people often give up. I have a very highly trained staff in behavior, where we do a lot of planned ignoring, and we don't tiptoe around meltdowns. I've had kids screaming for hours and hours, trashing my room, and we do go and use seclusion and restraint if we have to as a last resort. But it's really, really hard. For my program, the behavior management piece is so crucial to their learning, because when they know what to expect all the time, then they don't have to wonder. All those rules are set in stone. They know this is how I have to act. then everything else can go. Another major focus is social skills. Obviously, that's probably one of the biggest areas for kids on the spectrum. And all kids, actually. I feel like because of the internet and technology, it kind of has sucked the life out of our youth, and kids don't know how to interact anymore. And so I do 3 or 4 social skills groups a day, anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes, and we're explicitly teaching certain skills. It depends on the group, what I do. We do a lot of practice and reteaching and projects, and I'll show you some of the things that I use. So the first program that is the zones of regulation. And this program teaches self-regulation and emotional control. And everything that I do for my program is from this book. There's 4 colors to the zones of regulation. Blue, you're sad, tired, you're sick, you might be hurt. Then there's the green zone where you're ready to learn, you're okay, you're happy, things are going really well. The red zone is when you're feeling aggressive, you might be yelling and screaming, you kind of lost control. And the key to the zones program is the yellow zone, and it teaches kids their triggers. So for some kids, especially ones on the spectrum, if they can identify what upsets them, and we do a lot of work around this, noise, unexpected changes, when someone says they don't want to play with them, we teach them that they are to ask for a break. And that there's a lot of coaching that goes around that. My kids were self-contained initially because they were explosive. They didn't know how to regulate themselves. They got angry very quickly, and they were very misunderstood. And once we started talking about feelings and emotions, which is really, really hard for kids on the spectrum to do, they were able to identify in themselves what their triggers were. When I do that, I often copy it and I pass it to a classroom teacher or anybody who has that child so that they know what that looks like. And it's a yield sign, and it's yellow. And I write down whatever the kids tell me. So even if I think it's ridiculous or, it doesn't relate, it's their idea, it's their thought, it's their trigger, it goes on paper. And then we have the kids check in daily. And the biggest thing with the zones of regulation is that I don't ever want to use the language good and bad with the kids. It is bad to hit somebody, but it doesn't mean they're a bad person. So I try to label everything as safe or not safe, because the perception of themselves often goes downhill pretty quickly when they're struggling. And behavior is a communication tool, and one of the things that we do through the process of teaching emotional regulation in kids is, I don't know if you can see this or not, but this is what we call an ABC chart. And if a kid has any kind of incident, aggression, work avoidance, a friendship issue on the playground, we often fill out one of these, and it helps us figure out what the antecedent is. And for me, that's really important because the antecedent is the trigger. And I want to know why the behavior happened. That's not always important to everybody working with kids, but for me, and you'll find with kids on the spectrum and in general kids with disabilities, is that you can't expect a kid to stop a behavior, especially one on the spectrum. You have to teach a replacement behavior. And it only takes a student, especially one on the spectrum, of doing a behavior 1 or 2 times for it to become a learned behavior. And then you have a lot of undoing to do. And so that gives us a lot of information. You know, one of the questions that I was reading ahead of time was, you know, what have I learned over the years that a textbook didn't teach you? Parents is one of them. Data collection is another. But when a child's having a hard time, it's really difficult for parents to hear. And these data sheets, you know, give a lot of information. I don't give these to parents, but if a situation ever becomes contentious at all, or they're really defensive of their child, and I have this data, I can say, you know, at this time, this is happening, or, oh, look, Johnny is aggressive every single time, you know, it's math time. So we have to slowly shape his behavior to not be aggressive during math. So this gives a lot of helpful feedback. You can look up ABC data sheets online. There's tons of samples out there. This is one that we created when I taught in Hamden with Dr. Tim Rogers, who is a child psychologist in the Bangor area. He focuses on kids with autism, and this was kind of something that he had come up with. It's a quick, easy way to circle everything so you're not handwriting things in, because Lord knows teachers do not have enough time in the day. That's the other thing you learn. Forget about a lunch break and go to the bathroom when the kids go, because so another piece to the emotional regulation that we do is if any of my students are involved in an aggressive or an incident with another child, I do this. It's a think sheet, and it takes the reading out of it. They circle pictures, and it also helps with perspective taking, which is a very hard skill for kids on the spectrum to understand. It's the hardest unit I have to teach, and I never walk away feeling like they got it. That never happens. But this gets them to think about their behavior, how it made other people feel, what they can do differently next time, and then how to make a positive choice. And for me, we do a lot of mapping. You know, if you do this, this, and this, and the consequence is this, did you get what you wanted out of that, what you did? And you can use it with pictures, words with older kids if they can read, and that's really helpful. The other part of the zones that's really helpful is the size of the problem, and that helps kids start to look at their emotional response or reaction to a problem that they're encountering. And this is another really big one for my room, because if you look at, you know, Miss So-and-so has, you know, a substitute today, that's a size 5 problem for a kid on the spectrum. So they may have a total meltdown. Through the zones and teaching the size of the problem, we slowly start to see that really a substitute's a size 1 or a size 2. Like, you might have to use some coping strategies, but the reaction of having a substitute shouldn't be a size 5 when it's really a size 1. And we start to classify with kids that size 5 problems are catastrophic events, things that you would need police, ambulance for, you know, a fire burning down, a major surgery. And we do a lot of social coaching around that and using the size 5 language, and that's really helpful as well. Some other things that are in the program are like inner critic and inner coach, which really teaches kids that growth mindset and mindfulness, of not getting let down when things are hard. So that's the zones of regulation. I would highly, highly recommend it. I'm actually helping some general education teachers use this in the general ed setting, which is like getting a $100 bill for me, because all kids could benefit from this. And just, I think it's important for our kids with disabilities to see that they're no different than anybody else. I often explain to kids when they ask me, well, why does Johnny have to, use these during the school day? These are headphones that help filter out noise. And I'll say, not everybody comes to school to learn reading, writing, and math. Some kids come to school because, they have to learn how to behave, and they have to learn how to follow a routine, and they have to learn how to function in a group with other people. And, kids don't get that. And once there's conversation around that, it helps. I often will go in, if parents want me to, and I'll talk to the class and do read alouds to kind of front load a kid with disabilities. If the kid wants me to and the family is okay with it, I've done it for kids that have stimming behaviors. If they do a lot of finger flicking, or if you have any ritualistic behavior that might stand out, I may go in and do some pre-teaching so the kids are less likely to stare or ask, why does so-and-so do that? There's 8 children's books out there supporting kids with disabilities. There's one, my favorite one's called Special People, Special Ways. And I often will use that in the younger grades to help just teach about everybody's different, but they all have, everyone has feelings and wants to be liked and loved. And that's helpful too. One more thing I just want to show you about the zones before I move on is with each of my groups, we come up with coping skills to regulate that the kids can do during the day. And this is one that I did with a second grade group, and they came up with these. So when they were in the blue zone, talking to an adult, taking a break, reading, getting a shoulder rub, getting squishes from a ball, those were things that they thought that they could do to bring them back to the green zone. And one of the biggest things that we teach the kids with this program is that we go through all the different colors all day long. So it's typically not normal for anyone to be in the green zone all day. So you wake up and you're tired in the morning. I always use myself as an example, which they do not teach you in the books, but kids need to know that you are a real person and that you laugh, you cry, you get frustrated. And I will tell the kids, right now Mrs. B is in the yellow zone. And they'll think about that, and they'll think about their own behavior and try to figure out why I'm feeling that way. And I think it's important for them to know that their behavior impacts the people around them. I actually did a unit with them on Miss Nelson is Missing, and I taught perspective taking with that book, and they got to see that those kids were so naughty and they didn't listen, and the teacher just disappeared. And they asked me if I was going to disappear when they were naughty. And I had to say no, because I didn't want them to think I was giving up on them, but they were seeing the connection, which was what I wanted. The other thing that I just want to say, and then I'll show you some of my social thinking curriculum. One of the most important things that I did not learn in a book, but I learned from Dr. Tim Rogers, is that you never make a kid apologize. And we do a lot of talking about when you make a mistake, if you hurt somebody, things that you can do to make it right. But forcing a kid to apologize is not a genuine apology. And so I often will say to my students, you need to think about what you need to do next. And one of the things that I do to kick that off is we do these apology letters. And it's what they were sorry for and how they're going to make a different choice the next time. And oftentimes they want to write by not doing it. And I make them dig a little deeper and say something like, instead of hitting you, next time I will use my words to tell you that I'm angry. But I never, ever make a kid apologize, ever.
I totally agree.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, it's not genuine, and they don't always mean it. And I think that they have to do it when they're ready. And if they're never ready, then you have to teach that empathy to them so that they know that a sorry is necessary. But that's one of those battles that, sometimes I lose.
I've got a question here.
Sure.
Yes.
Do those letters actually go to the people that they did something to or hurt or whatever?
Oh, yes. Every letter that they write goes. I often will... one of the things that we do really well in my program is a lot of social coaching. And so if there's an issue between peers, we often go back and forth to problem solve because it takes two to tango. And I often, it's never one-sided, so to speak. And so we will have a conversation with the classroom teacher. No, you got to go. Thank you. We'll have a conversation together. I will pull the kids in. We do a lot of talking. So, all right, let me show you something else. The other program that we do with some of the kids is this is the Incredible Flexible You. It's a social thinking curriculum that I don't know if anyone's familiar with Michelle Garcia Winner, but she puts all kinds of stuff out. And the basis of everything that I do is social thinking stuff. It teaches about thoughts and feelings, how to have a body in the group. Whole body listening is another one that kids really love. That's a really fun one to teach to students because everyone thinks that you can only listen with your ears. But I actually have a Larry in my classroom. He's a student. And the kids love Larry. And we do a lot of teaching about the 8 whole body listening components. And I do a lot of pre and post tests with teaching this. And, the idea that you listen with your eyes is really silly. But by the end of the unit, which is part of the social thinking, the kids will say, Mrs. B, my brain needs to be thinking about what you're saying. And I'll say, you're right, it does. So your idea about recess needs to wait until after group. And they really start to monitor themselves. And I feel like there's a really fun way to be creative with the social thinking stuff. It can be very wordy, and if kids have any kind of language-based disability, it can be tricky. But the older they get, it's really helpful. One of the things that I do. Sorry. I have 3 kids, and one of them has to be picked up by 5:10. Sorry. Yes, I've been there. Okay. We do a lot with visuals and hands-on things, and when I do the social thinking, and if anyone's had an interaction with a student with autism, you'll know that sometimes they say things that they shouldn't say. And my kids will do that too. It's not something that just kids on the spectrum do, but it's really hard for them. And so when we're working in social skills group, everybody has one of these, and I'll hold them too. And I'll ask them things like, I'll give them an example, and they'll have to say, okay, that's something you should think in your head. You shouldn't say it out loud. And then I'll hold up this, and they know that this is a speech bubble, which means that that's something that they can say. And so there are times when, kids will come in and they'll be like, Miss B, your hair looks really bad today. And even though it's hilarious most of the time when they say that, I often will say that's one of those things that you think in your head, but you don't say it out loud. Sometimes my kids get really angry and they'll threaten to kill other kids. I'm going to kill you. And we do a lot of coaching around, okay, you may be really mad and want to say that. That's something you can think in your head, because your thoughts, I don't hold you accountable for. But as soon as you say it, I have to hold you accountable. And they start to kind of monitor themselves with the visual. Anything that you can do for kids, and this isn't just kids on the spectrum with visuals, because I have sat through hundreds and hundreds of IEP meetings and evaluations, and I feel like what every kid on the spectrum needs, every kid needs. The visuals, the structure, the consistency benefits all kids. You'd think one of my own kids had a disability every year when I fill out the, what's your ideal classroom for your own kid? And I'm like, visuals, structure, good classroom management, and then I'm thinking, geez, that's everything that I do in my program, but I want that for my kids too, because it provides a security to them to know what to expect next, and that routine. And a lot of these visuals are out all the time, because you never know when a kid's going to say something that they should or shouldn't say. And so we often have these things all around us. The other program that I ended the year with, which is one of my most favorite programs ever, the kids absolutely love it, is the Superflex program with the Unthinkables. My mom, who is awesome and loves to craft, she made me these superhero capes. And so when I'm teaching the social thinking stuff, my kindergartners ate this right up. They got to put a superhero cape on. And we taught all the different unthinkables that the purpose of the program is to teach your brain to be flexible, a flexible thinker. And they use Superflex, who's the superhero, who is supposed to have all these flexible strategies that he can pull out of his, whenever he needs to defeat one of the unthinkables. And rock brain is one of them. And, that rock brain makes you get stuck on things where you're inflexible. There's worry wall, who makes you worry too much. There was once funny. And that's one you'll find on the kids on the spectrum struggle with. They tell jokes at inappropriate times. They may laugh when you tell them someone's died. And so my kindergartners, I could say, you're being rock brain right now. You're having rock brain. And they knew what that meant. And they started talking to each other that way. And my parents would call me up and they'd be like, my kid is talking at this home and teaching their brother and sister about this. I'm like, well, this is great. Energy Harry has too much energy. one of the other ones, let's see, Unwanderer, makes people not socially wonder about other people. And we just got done this unit. So I would teach an unthinkable, and the kids would do a coloring page. You can find them right on Google Image. And I have a book that has every unthinkable coloring page in it. And this program is for probably second grade, I would say. You can use it with younger kids, but there's some writing involved, and my kindergartners can't write. So I had to teach the concepts, but I had to adapt it to what they were good at, and kindergartners are great at coloring. And and then they got to invent their own unthinkable, which was really, really cool. There's some great Pinterest projects on, teaching how to be flexible with like a rock and then an elastic. And I took out tons of books from our library. Our school librarians are wonderful. Treat them nicely. They don't tell you that in a textbook, but librarians are someone that you want on your side. And the custodians, that's another one. And I gave her the topics and the ideas of the unthinkables, and they know books better than anybody in the school. And they gave me so much rich children's literature. And every day after I explicitly taught the unthinkables, we would read a children's book. And they had to discover which unthinkable took over the main character. And it's interesting, the different perspectives of the kids, because they always didn't come up with the same conclusion. And if they could make a good case, and it wasn't what I was hoping they would take away, but if I could see where they would get it, then we use that as a teachable moment. And we talk about it, and then they'd get to color that unthinkable and bring it home. But the social thinking stuff is crazy expensive. They don't tell you that you spend a lot of your own money teaching. Your school budget is not much, and everything that I ordered for next year for social thinking cost me $250, and that's 80% of your budget. It's and that doesn't leave room for supplies and everything else. And so there's grants and there's different things out there depending on the school that you work in, where you can get stuff. But once you buy the social thinking things and these curriculums for your room, you have them forever. Oftentimes they come with a CD that has all the printables in it, so that you just have to download them or open them up and print them, which is what I do. Some of these programs I've purchased myself so that if I consult anywhere, I can bring them and use them for that purpose. But the social thinking piece for my classroom and the zones of regulation, whole body Larry, those are what runs my room. Let me show you something else, because you're probably learning about proficiency-based standards and learning targets and all that jargon that our kids don't necessarily get, but you still have to partake in. So I'm going to show you my classroom board, and on here are the different learning targets, and they're kind of broad, but they're the points and the principles that I want the kids to take away over the course of the year. And I put these up and I read them to the kids to, so that they're aware. But it's also a good reminder for your staff and for you on what your goal is, where you're headed. And I leave them up all the time. So, all right, let's see. So I have can you see everything?
Yes.
Okay. So I have my zones of regulation for being able to identify the colors and emotions that we associate with each color. Using coping strategies to control emotions and tools, and then, and respond in ways that are expected. Explaining the difference between expected and unexpected behaviors. This is crucial. And then the other piece that I started with my older kids was I can stop, opt, and go when I face a challenging situation. And this has to do with everything that they've learned before. So stopping, the opting is considering what the options are. And so you'd be thinking about positive and negative consequences, and then picking a choice, picking an option and going with it. So that's another thing. I have a board over here. I don't know if you can see it. Some of my stuff's packed up for next year. But this is my zones of regulation wall. And that's where my stopped, opt, and go is. And I put that visual up. And then all the different zones of regulation are here. And these are all the things that the kids have come up with for how to regulate themselves during the day. And then I took the words and I put the pictures to go with them because not everybody can read. And then my walls are pretty bare right now, but all on my walls is what I do with expected and unexpected behaviors. And I typically don't do unexpected behaviors for the cafeteria, but we typically have like a morning meeting, or we use social group and we'll talk about the expected behaviors for the cafeteria. Whenever I write social stories or I do rule boards, I try to keep everything really positive. And I try to do positive statements like, I can walk in the hallways. I can or will keep my hands by my side. You don't want to say things like, don't touch people in front of you. Don't run in the hallways. Using no is often a trigger for kids with autism and kids in general. Nobody likes to be told no. And so we often try to do positive statements for the kids, and that's really important. So anyhow, let me look at my questions I wrote down.
I have some more for you too.
Okay. The only other thing that I would say for integrating students in the classroom is you have to build a collaborative working environment with other classroom teachers. I feel like not everybody is as comfortable with our kids, this population of kids, as I am. I have a lot of kids that swear and kick and just do really unexpected things that get them to me. And it takes a lot of convincing and a lot of hard work. And, blood, sweat, and tears go into my kids. And when they come around those, there's just so much to celebrate. But it's always we start slow. So we go in for the times we know that they're going to be successful. We always do preferred times of day. And we always start with we leave the least preferred. If they get kicked out because of writing, we're not going to start with writing. But all of my kids were able to be mainstreamed into the classroom this year, which was really awesome.
Wow. Yeah.
I only had a few, but it took a lot of hard work, and it was a team effort. I mean, we had a really positive environment, and it takes a lot of trust. If someone's worried a kid's going to explode or have a meltdown, and you tell them you're going to be there, you better be there so that they'll want that kid there. And I've worked really hard to get my colleagues to trust me and to follow a plan and to hold up my end of the deal, that if something doesn't work or if I'm going to be there, I'm there. Because not everybody has the same experience in schooling that we do. And the best experience you're going to get is just when you're in the classroom, the hands-on experience. So I'll take a couple questions before I have to go pick up my son.
Okay, how much time do you spend dealing with paperwork versus actually teaching?
Oh, boy. Oh, the dreaded paperwork question. Well, with 26 kids on my caseload, you can imagine that's 26 IEPs to write. And I did it with a smile. Honestly, the same expectation for other teachers for planning and prepping is, I have that same expectation, but the special ed paperwork is just another factor. You're going to have to bring some stuff home. my special ed director is amazing, and if you get backed up, she'll give you paperwork days. Some days I have to stay after school. I use every bit of time I have during the day, planning period. I do a lot of prep work ahead of time for IEP meetings, so that things are done. But I do have to work from home sometimes, and there are days I have to come in on the weekend and just get some stuff done. But you come up with a system that works for you. I often organize my whole caseload of kids, and I put all the triennials and annuals, and if they're for that school, for 2016, I bold them in a certain color, and then I do the 2017 in a different color, so that they always pop out to me and I don't miss it. Almost. I tend to be overly sensitive to the paperwork. I don't know. Just a minute. Okay, well, we're going to leave in just a minute. I tend to be overly sensitive to it just because it's a legal document. And, if anything ever happened and you were out of compliance and you went to due process and your name's on that, I just don't want to go there.
No. Another question, what are the educational requirements for your specific job?
Well, I have a master's in special ed, moderate to severe disabilities. And then I had to take the practice 1 and 2. So, that's it. I'm taking classes towards my CAS eventually, but right now I'm a mom first, and my kids are, the priority. It's a lot of schooling, that's for sure.
Yeah. The one that goes with that is, are the requirements, there's specific requirements for the state as well as for your district, keeping up to date and everything?
So I have my 282, and then some people have their 286, which is like severe disabilities, like kids who are in a wheelchair or have multiple disabilities. And just a master's degree in passing is how I got my 282. But it's the same as a teaching certificate. So every 5 years, I have to have 90 credit hours, which I'm up this year. And then just the state decided to change their system. And so they granted me a 1-year pass until next year, until they figure out their online system for recertification. It's a nightmare. Often you have to get prior approval for courses and workshops. And whoever does that at your school, there's often multiple people that you're assigned to depending on the grade level. And then you can get credit hours for what you do. I took 2 classes in 5 years, which was 45 credit hours each, which was super easy. I don't know that I'll do that this time. I'll probably be a lot more diligent about keeping all my certificates for CPI training. Anything that you do outside of the district, you often get credit hours for. And if you can prove your 90 and get them pre-approved by whoever in your building does that, then you should be good to go. I don't have to keep taking special ed courses. I just have to do whatever everybody else does to keep my certification.
What age kids do you work with most?
K2, kindergarten through 2nd grade. My program is a K4. The Brewer Community School is one of the biggest schools, elementary schools in the state. We have over 1,000 kids, K8. And so we're on 2 different time schedules. And so my program goes K4, although we're trying to work on that to make it a little more narrowed, just because with 26 kids, it became very difficult to service 4 different grades, 4 lunches, 4 recesses, 4 schedules. And I did it gracefully. Well, it maybe not have been gracefully all the time, but it was really hard. It was really hard.
Do you get any pre-K? Do you have any pre-kindergartners?
We do have pre-K in our building, but they're through CDS.
Okay.
CDS isn't the best service that I've ever seen. Often the teachers will come to me, and I'll do some workshops, or I'll do like behavior stuff with them. They have always found what we do as a school a little bit more helpful than what CDS offers. But yeah, if it's needed, and it depends on the kid and what the agreement is.
Yeah. Yeah. CDS used to be a lot better when they had more money.
Yeah.
It really was. Okay, that's all that I have right now, and I want to thank you very much for taking your time, and I hope we didn't cause you to miss somebody.
Oh, no, I have everybody here and everywhere, and they're doing great. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It was wonderful.
You're welcome. Have a great afternoon.
You